We're going to crack on with the lead section now. Let's start with the pan whistle. We have the kilohertz stereo enhancer narrowing the image of the pan whistle here. I did think that I wanted a little bit of stereo, but in the end I opted to make it completely mono. We're going to be sending this to reverbs and delays later anyway, so we'll get a nice sense of depth and width, but have a better defined sensor to the stereo image. And next up, we have what can only be described as the Mount Everest of bell curves. We're using 18 decibels at 15 kilohertz, so quite high up, with a fairly wide band. Now here, what I was trying to do is to bring out the sound of the breath blowing through the instruments. Flutes and whistles tend to be fairly pure toned, with a lot of weight on the fundamentals. Bringing out the breathiness was one way of exposing a key part of this instrument's personality into the mix. Then we're just high passing to the lowest fundamental played, clearing out any non-musical noise in the lows. Lesson here is, don't be afraid to get out the sledgehammer. Take a listen. Again, we're just defaulting to the 4KE and Hollywood here. We're not hitting them too hard for the most part. As I've said in previous episodes, the effect isn't always apparent in isolation. It's more of an accumulation of these processes in each track, which will make a big difference in the end. From this moment on, I'm not going to talk about the saturators unless there's some reason I differ from the defaults that I've chosen for this mix. On the custom op though, we're getting between 3 dB and 5 dB of gain reduction using a tweaked synth enhancer preset. This results in smooth, transparent compression, which just tucks in the more intensely played parts, so they don't jump above the mix as much. One thing to note is we are using the airy mode for the tonal characteristics of the custom op though. With the breathiness that I wanted to bring out, I thought that made sense to utilise it and blend it in using the little intensity knob there on the left. Let's do an A-B of the entire process. And now with the mixing context. Next up, let's talk about what's going on with the Uilleann pipes. We are using the kilohertz stereo enhancer to make the pipes mono. Then we are going through the Infinity EQ. We're using a high pass and we're doing that up to the lowest fundamental played, clearing out any rumble. And then we're adding some weight to the low end with a low shelf and pulling out some boxy mids around the 500 Hz area. Then we're softening the treble and top end with a nice wide bell curve and a low pass filter. The main objective here was to control how bright the pipes were. Unlike the pan flute we worked on previously, The uilleann pipes are harmonically very rich, and for me, we needed some rebalancing to help them blend into the mix better. Take a listen. So you can hear we are losing that fizzy top, which for me adds focus to the musical elements of the sound and helps to avoid any harshness coming through on particularly bright systems. But this is definitely subjective. It is a part of the instrument's sound, so taking it away may not always be the answer. Sometimes just using a high shelf to simply rebalance it with the mix would be a better way to go about it. Next up for the uilleann pipes, we have two EQs which are counteracting each other on the input and output of the compressor. The reason for this is that the pipes can play a low drone, which is not what we want the compressor to be reacting to when it compresses. I want the compressor to focus on the melody notes on the top, so attenuating everything below 300 Hz on the way in and bringing all of that low end frequency back up on the way out was a really good way of getting the compressor to work the way that we want it to work. And now on the compressor itself, we're using a medium slow attack, a fairly quick release, 4:1 ratio. The high pass detector and bell curve are both checked to essentially focus the compressor further on those melody notes. Then finally, we're using distortion too for some subtle harmonic thickening. Let's take a listen to what the compressor is doing. As you can see, the compressor is essentially ignoring the low drones and helps to limit how dynamic the melody part is. The medium slow attack here is important because if you set the attack too slow in this scenario, you will get a transient moment where when the melody comes in for the first time, you will hear the compressor sort of snatch at it. Because the attack is quicker, you don't get too much time to notice it grabbing at the melody when it first comes in. Also, watch out for setting the attack too quick because it will unnaturally limit the initial attack of the instruments. I'm compressing a little hard, but it's not altering the sound too much because the attack and release are set up for the natural ADSR of the instruments. And now we have the custom opto, which, unlike the FG Stress, I actually do want it to act upon the entire sound, including the low drone. Here, I'm going for some simple gluing and also restricting the dynamics further so we can anchor this part at just the right level relative to the synth pad. I'm also utilising the tone control set to warm with the intensity turned up to full. I think this type of harmonic distortion will complement the naturally rich sound of the uilleann pipes. Here's what it sounds like. Then finally, we're adding some tape distortion. Firstly, note how hard we're pushing the sound on the VU meter, where we're going to start to generate even more harmonics to help thicken up the lower end of the pipes. We're also using 15 inches per second as opposed to 30, which should subtly warm the uilleann pipes even more. As you can hear, it just adds more harmonic density to those lows, thickening up the track nicely. And here's the AB of the entire process chain. For me, the track is more focused in the mix now. It's more dynamically controlled, and the saturation has helped make the track sound a lot fuller and less brittle. Next, we're going to go through the concertina and accordion EQ. It's really simple here. Again, we are just high passing up to the lowest frequency that was played. Then on the concertina, we are low passing the top at 6K to soften up the brightness. Since the concertina is layering with the violin, I didn't want it to be too harmonically dominant, and I wanted it to more serve as a additional layer to the violin sound, which we could blend it in and out with as we needed. Then it's pretty much the same with the accordion, except we only needed a low shelf to attenuate the amount of mids coming from the accordion. As you can hear, we are simply thinning the sound out, making sure our lead section doesn't start to sound boomy in the context of the mix. Next, I wanted to share with you some doctoring that was needed for the violin. Now, these spiccato samples sounded really nice, but every now and again, when you're using the higher velocities, the attack of some of the sounds would sound too abrasive and scratchy in the mix. So to solve this, I simply put a compressor in the top band of multipass at around 2.5k. The compressor is set up so it's essentially working like a limiter. We're using a ratio greater than 10. We're using the fast detector type with a fast attack and a fast release. Then the threshold is then adjusted so that we get gain reduction only on the parts which sound too abrasive. So this is a really quick way to treat these types of transient moments which, tend to occur every now and again in the performance at a very specific frequency band. Let's take a listen. So as you can hear, it's just softening up those scratchy moments, but then leaving the other parts which aren't scratchy, so we're not losing brightness on the parts which actually do sound okay. After that, we have the EQ, and the first thing I want to draw your attention to is this nice bump at around 15k. So after using multipass to make the attack of those spiccato samples more even, we can now accentuate that part of the sound of the mix without risk of having the scratchy attack jumping out and ruining the overall balance of the mix. Then we are high passing out the rumble, keeping that low end nice and clean. We're using a low pass to soften up our 15k boost, then adding some weight into those mids using a low shelf and also a bell curve. Here's what it sounds like. Like I said earlier, I'm not going to go into the saturators unless I change from my default choice. In this instance, we have changed to the London for our virtual preamp. The main reason for this was we wanted to counteract the brightening we had just done with the EQ by using something that has a warmer harmonic signature than what we were using by default, the Hollywood virtual preamp. What I really wanted to show you inside of Virtual Mix Rack is how the FG2A compressor is shaping the initial attack of the violin really beautifully, just using the default settings. We're hitting the violin at about minus 3 dB usually, and then minus 6 dB of gain reduction during more intense moments. Take a listen. For me, it makes the violin more aggressive sounding, which for this mixing style, I think it's perfect. Let's take a listen in the context of the entire mix. And that's everything for our lead section. Next episode is going to take this mix to a whole new level because we will be adding reverbs. So far, we have squeezed as much as possible out of this track without using any reverbs or effects. So join us next time where we'll be adding depth into our mix. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.